Hi everyone, welcome to my live review of a Claire McCardell dress. I hope you're all doing well. I'm going to wait a few minutes for people to join me, and then I will talk all about this wrap dress, why I love it so much and how it's constructed, and we can have a chat about it. So let's see who turns up. Hope you're all doing well on this evening. I'm really looking forward to sharing this dress with you. And I hope I can see some of you have shown up. I can hear very slight delay, so I'm quickly gonna sort it out. So hello everybody, welcome to the live stream. This was a slightly weird beginning because I had an echo, so I had to sort it out. But oh, hello Sharon and hello Anita. So welcome to my live stream. Today I'm going to talk about this wrap dress. If you haven't met before, I'm Charlotta. I really love vintage pattern cutting, which is I made this dress. I also teach people how to learn how to pattern cut. And if you really want to learn how to create your own garments, draft your own patterns, I've got a whole website full of tutorials from really basic to more advanced like this. And tonight I'm going to talk about how this dress is made, show it to you how, because hopefully these two dresses look really similar, but they're actually a bit different. So I'm going to talk about the differences and the difference between completely recreating an historical look, a 1954 Claire McCardell dress, and sort of adapting it to your own style. So hello everybody. Oh, I've got Lisa here. Hello. And hello Yolanda. So lovely to see you all. And I'm glad you like the dress. So I'm going to do some swirling and showing off in a second. But I quickly wanted to show you where it's actually come from. If you haven't seen this before, it is a 1954, I think, Claire McCardell dress, and it is a proper wrap dress from the 50s. So Claire McCardell is famous for the wrap dresses, and this is I don't think it's her most typical example, because she's I don't know whether you agree with me. I would think of Claire McCardell is really easy to wear, sportswear. It's clothes you can get things done in. You can do things. But this is an evening dress, so this is probably like a slightly more unusual Claire McCardell, but I still love it. So I'm going to hopefully share the original image with you. So it isn't working. I will show you my iPad, which is always a great beginning. But I think most of you have seen it. But what do you think? I love this Claire McCardell, but I don't think it's very typical. What do you think? Because I always think Claire McCardell is sort of lots of stripes. So this has stripes. This dress. So it's the original is made from a silk. I made mine out of a linen cotton mix. I'm going to talk you through it now. So what I'm going to do is move up. I hope you all, sorry, this Saturday night, getting everything done on time is always bonkers. And I always forget things like how to turn off the echo and things like that. So if I seem slightly frazzled, that's fine. I managed to get it all set up in about 5 minutes, so I'm doing quite well. I'm going to take my socks off because they're not really a part of the look, but it's freezing here. So these are the 2 Claire McCardell dresses. This one, this is the half scale model, and I've done it exactly to the Claire McCardell dress. And that's because it's a drafting tutorial for Patreon. So if you're my Patreon, you might have already seen this one. And there's a full drafting guide on how to create the whole dress and a full sewing guide. So that is more or less authentic. I always think with styles like that, I've only ever seen the front of the garment. I've seen a full, like it's basically nearly floor length, but I've never seen the back. So the back I sort of made up from information I had from Claire McCardell. So you can see on this one, the back has what's called a really typical, I'm gonna lower her a little bit. It's got a typical Claire McCardell neckline where it, can you see, where it dips at the center back. And then I've added a center back seam, and I've done it on a chevron. And it has, I've just done it as pleats at the back. But I would imagine this being, I think some dresses sometimes from that period, they actually sort of slightly distort the side seam, so you don't have darts. But I put in darts on mine. You can see it slightly ruins the chevron look if you have a darts, but I think I wanted this dress to be really fitted because this looks super fitted. So on the original, I think it would have had darts. It's really fitted around the waist. And then what is typical of a Claire McCardell dress is that it's really practical to put on. So I've changed that slightly on mine. Mine isn't as practical to put on because I put a zip in. So it's more of a contemporary dress. Oh, and hello, Kate. Thank you for joining me. And I'm glad you like the dresses. Yes, it's always a bit weird to see the two. And if I step back, they look the same size as well. So it gets really confusing. But I'm going to tell you now, I made this. So this is a bit of I made the tutorial, the first tutorial just for the bodice last year because lots of you and me loved it. And then I actually said, I like it so much, I'm going to make my own dress. So I made its dress and I adapted it to what I thought would suit me, and rather than being really authentic. And it works fine. It's really nice. It took me absolutely ages to make just because I changed stuff which made it more complicated, which I'm now sort of regretting. And then I made the half scale model for you, and now I really love the real one. So I'm going to be slightly jealous of all of you making the original one, because what's really great about it, and if you watch the sewing tutorial, you might have seen it, is that it's a wrap dress with a difference. So normally a wrap dress works like a coat. So you put it on like a coat, you wrap one side over, you either have a little gap in the other side and you put your tie through, or you have a button and then you put normally your right hand side on top, and then you tie up your tie or you button it up. And this is similar in principle, but this has got a functioning side seam. So normally this, I'm going to try to find here, and we talked about wrap dresses quite a lot last week. Normally with wrap dresses, you always have the panels. You can always see it's a wrap dress. And also, depending on the fabric, you have to be careful because you have this wrap at the front. So the fabrics can wrap each other the wrong way. And with certain fabrics can get really annoying. So, which is why this is great, because this has got a side seam. So the whole skirt is a fully functioning skirt. And what you would do is you would step into this dress, you would pull it up, and then you would do up your left hand side, and you have probably a little button on the side seam and at the base. But then can you see here, all this extra material is actually your pocket, and your pocket acts as part of your opening. So she has got really nice knives. I haven't put mine in yet. So you can see the pockets sort of act as a facing, as a button stand, like a placket, but it just basically makes that gap you need to get in disappear. So rather than there being an opening and you suddenly flashing everybody, it turns into a pocket, which means it just sort of all disappears. Now can you see I made the pocket in the same fabric, in the cell fabric, and I continued the stripe. So it really becomes more or less invisible, so that you can't really tell where the dress opens and there it closes. Oh, hello, Rox. Lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us. No worries. I've only just started. I was a bit late. So I'm just talking about how to get into this, the original Claire McCardell. I'm going to talk about in a second how I'm getting into mine, which is easier in certain ways, but slightly more complicated than others. And if you watched, I really want to talk about this a bit more. If you watched my sewing tutorial, I talked a bit about, let me take it off. Actually, no, it's easier if I actually do it up properly. It fits her. And I'm loving this half square mannequin. It's like, it's not like playing dress up, but it's like you're having like a sort of little mini model and you can play around it. Oh, hello, Miss J. Lovely to see you. Thank you for the compliment. I was quite impressed with my pattern matching. For my own stuff, I can be a little bit slapdash. And I look at some of my dresses over the last 2 years. Sometimes I think, what were you thinking? But I try to do this properly for you. Yes, if you ever trying to spot on some of my dresses, there's some really weird pattern matching going on or not matching on my dresses. Or I sort of get there 90% and then I suddenly lose it and it doesn't quite match up. But anyway, I sort of think it's part of, I don't mind it that much. If it's for somebody else, I want it perfect. But for myself, I'm sort of, I quite appreciate not the homemade look, but it's like handmade and it's not always perfect. And especially, I don't know, maybe some of you are using vintage fabrics. Quite often you really sort of have to move things around, so you can't do it as perfectly because you don't want to waste fabric. So going back to how to get into this dress, what the only problem with this method of doing is that the depth of your pocket defines how wide your access point is. So if you're, for example, curvier, so if you have a narrow waist and a wider hip, you might need your pocket to be deeper because that forms your only access. So what you end up to get into is, I'm going to just turn the back inside out, is basically your waist measurement plus your pocket depth. So that is quite limiting. So for example, on my dress, it's actually it's not too bad. So the whole sorry, I'm just losing my thread. So it's 60. So it's actually a meter. So it is actually quite a lot of space there. Oh, hello, Rika. Wie is dir? For one of my German patrons here. And I'm glad you like the side pocket. It is very clever. But we're going to make the side pocket even cleverer now because Astrid, who is one of my patrons, was very knowledgeable. I always learn something from her. She suggested And I think it's a really clever idea. If you love this idea, but you're saying, I want a really fitted dress, and for example, my waist is 80, but my hip, I'm really curvy. So I need much more than the depth of my pocket, which might be only 20 centimeters. That's not enough to get it in. What Astrid said is, where your pocket joins your skirt, you can actually put a zip in. And if you put a zip in, I'm actually going to be really naughty now, and I'm going to cut open my pattern a little bit just to show you, and I will stitch it shut later on. So can you see, this is my inside pocket still, and this thread joins onto the, actually I've done the wrong seam, but it doesn't matter. Basically what you can do is, so this is where you can see it live. I just unpicked the wrong seam, which is so typical. I've unpicked my really nice seam, which should not be unpicked. So I'm going to pin that shut, which is why there's that very good saying that you should always check everything twice before you cut anything, and I haven't. Basically, I'm going to start again now. If you have your dress closed, let's start again. Let's do this properly. Not get overexcited and cut anything else off. So you can see, this is my opening. I just cut this edge open, which I don't want to cut open because it's really nice. But the inside of your pocket, so the inner edge, you can put an invisible zip in there. And if you make the zip the whole height of your pocket, you can add something like an extra 40 centimeter or an extra foot roughly of extra bit, because it opens up. And then you just zip it up and you make it tight. And the other option, of course, is that you don't even need to put a zip. You can just have this open and have a little hook and eye, a little button at the top. And both of them means you can just open it that much up more, and it'd be much easier to get in. So that's really clever. And that took me a while to work out. So I think that's where you need to sort of look at different images, because most of Claire McCardell's wrap dresses are proper wrap dresses. I'm going to show you an inside. So it normally always look like that. So can you see, it normally is a proper wrap dress. So the left-hand side gets put on first, and then you wrap the right-hand side on top. But the pocket basically acts as the wrap detail, but I think it makes it into a proper dress, because the reason why I changed my dress, I'm going to talk about it in a second why it's different, is because I love the ease of construction of wrap dresses, because you don't have zips in, they're really easy to put on. But if you have a tie, I never liked it when wearing it. You can make, it's really hard to get it to sit perfectly, because either you have to tie it really tight for everything to sit nicely when you can't breathe, or if you don't tie it tight enough, it sort of always moves slightly, so you're constantly readjusting yourself. So I love the idea of the pocket of the buttons of Claire McCardell, because that takes away that sort of over tightening or not tight enough factor. But I went with a different option, and what I did, I'm going to show it to you on myself, and then if you want to have any questions about constructions or how the insides of the dress look, then I can take it off and put something else on and show you. But let's have a look at this dress. So the bodice on this dress is 99% identical to my little Claire McCardell dress. If it's a little bit different, it's because I made the two drafting tutorials about 3 months apart, and also for my own, my block is slightly different, so it looks differently. So that it will be quite interesting. I'm really going to look forward to some of you making this, if you are, because I think it will look slightly different on each one, because it's basically all depends with your bust. And I think I've talked about it in the tutorial. is whether you, if you're fuller busted, the pleats become bigger, so you might want to put a little dart in here. It's also where you exactly put the pleats, so where you find them flattering to yourself, and I did 2 trials for that. So one just to check the pleat position, and I changed them quite a lot. I think even I still think one of them is slightly not 100% perfect, but I can live with it. But I changed that quite a lot because I think to begin with, and I know Kate, I think you had the same. Sorry, that's really loud in my house. I think Kate, you had the same problem that I think the first trial with pleats went how you wanted it. So that's why you want to make your first trial just to see how you like how the pleats sit. Maybe you want to maybe move the volume more from up here or add extra volume from up here. However, you want to keep some of the volume back as a dart. But otherwise, put her in the front so you can see it's a bit weird because of course the print on her, I think, is absolutely perfect. Do you agree? Because I think that is actually, I know it's a triple stripe, but I think that is properly, I think it's more or less the right size, maybe a tiny bit too big. While on me, it's probably, it could do with being slightly wider, but I think it works well. And then what I did, I made the collar as a shawl collar, but that was again because I wasn't sure at that point how it would look on the original. And when I looked at some different wrap dresses from Claire McCardell and read some sort of description, and they said that she always has, but I know I already showed you, but if you are just joining, she always often did that really nice vintage detail where the collar dips into the center back. So it's like a shawl collar construction, but a little bit, well, it's more or less, I think in the draft you talk about angles and stuff, which are a bit different. But mine is a shawl collar. And it's a really narrow shawl collar, but I think that's really up to you. I actually think that the original one is such a really flattering details. If I did again, I guess I could still do it, but and then what I did, because we first looked at it, and that's something I still like about my dress, I have to say, is can you see, because Claire McCardell always did a dolman sleeve, and with a dolman sleeve, when you put your arms down, you just, because of the way we talked about it last week a bit, isn't it? You get a few creases here, and that's how you can always tell it's a dolman sleeve, because just you need enough movement. The rule of thumb I have always done, you need enough movement in your arms that you can sort of lift up your hands to the height of your bust point without distorting the whole garment. So can you see? I can lift up my arms and I'm not distorting my dress at all. And it's only if I go higher up, the whole dress lifts up. The sort of rule of thumb is that you want your sleeves to be, there's enough ease of movement that you can sort of do stuff, because that's all we do. We don't lift our arms any higher, but that's sort of a good rule of thumb. And with a dolman sleeve, to be able to do that, you need the angle to be sort of there. If you do it like this, you could do it, but then you wouldn't be able to move around unless it's jersey. So that's why Claire McCardell, who always made clothes which are really well fitted, she used dolman sleeves. And they're also, you know what, they're really easy to make, because what I decided was to put gusset in, because I do like something really tricky. Sometimes I do question myself. So I did my first trial with a diamond gusset, which wasn't very bright, because can you see how the wrap comes? If I have a diamond gusset here, that's going to be exactly where my wrap stand is, which means you have to try to fasten your wrap on a gusset, which you can, it's fine, but I didn't fancy it. So what I did is I have done a strip gusset. So I've got tutorial for the easy summer top on Patreon next week, and I'm gonna talk that top has an easy strip gusset because I think the idea is really nice. But can you see I've got basically a strip running down my side seams. You can see my invisible zip. But that strip basically means I can have less of a creases. So when I have I'm just going to do the same position as the Claire McCardell. Go around. If I stand like the Claire McCardell, can you see? It's complete, there's no creases here. But the Claire McCardell has this sort of, you can see there's quite a few creases. So which is why I did it, because I quite like that. But it's got a really smooth line. But it is more complicated. If some of you, quite a few are my lovely patrons, if you really want to know how to add a strip gusset, even on Tuesday we've got a private Q&A on Patreon. So if you want to do it, I can do a quick tutorial on there, because it is a nice detail. And when you can swap your dolman sleeve for a gusset sleeve, it just means sort of slightly changing the order. And I put in, that's the question. Oh, so Miss J says, I've never seen a strip gusset like that. How interesting. Glad you like it. Thank you. I think anything gusset, I think there's so many possibilities. And tell you the truth, when I first came to pattern cutting, I only knew that diamond one, which is really the most basic one, and which works really well because it gives you a beautiful, Balenciaga always does it there. It's just a perfect cut. I mean, you can lift up your arms. But if you start looking at even like any old pattern cutting books, but especially sort of even like 60s, 70s, they have so many different gussets. And on Patreon, we've done a statement gusset, which is really clever as well. So again, it's like adding this movement, getting beautifully fitted shoulder. But what the great thing is about the strip gusset and also statement gussets is that the sewing is so much easier, because I love a gusset, but I hate stitching with diamond because you always end up with that point here where you have to put your diamond into a keyhole slit, and you have to stitch really precisely, you have to fuse it, all that stuff, so it doesn't fray. By this one, you can see it's got one pressure point, but it's more like that, so it will be a lot harder wearing, and it's a lot easier to make. So which is why I chose it as well. But what it basically enables me as well, the strip gusset, is I put in a invisible zip. So I moved my wrap slightly forward, and then what you could do as well, if you could to put like fake hook and eyes on, or fake buttons on in the detail. But that's just because if you wanted to put just a zip in, because you could put a zip in here as well. But if you did an invisible zip, you have quite a lot of layers with the pleats, which is why I sort of moved it forward as well. So it's in the invisible zip is just in a separate panel, so it's easier to make. So that's just slightly different. And I think, to tell you the truth, if I made it again, I would make it like the authentic Claire McCardell dress. So I've learned something, because I think I overcomplicated things, because I thought, because I had prejudice against wrap dresses, you could say. But now I've seen how this works. I absolutely love it. And I think I'm going to make another one, full-sized, like this, maybe different neckline, slightly lower. But just with that button detail and the pocket detail, because it means you get really big pockets. So I've got big pockets on here. So I'm going to step slightly back. So can you... So can you see I've got big pockets as well? So it's a really nice dress, and you can see I think I've made the skirt slightly shorter than the original. But so I put big pockets in, but because of the position of that means your zip has to finish quite high up, because I like, well, it depends on your pockets, how you want your pockets, but I like mine so I can stand and have my hands in there. But yes, on this one you can do really deep pockets. And yes, Yolanda, you're right. I think it's the perfect, I think original as well. It's that sort of, it's a very chic dress, but you can imagine going out in it, but then you can also have dinner in it and go out and have like a dinner date or something. But it's not too overdressed. And I think if you made this, I can imagine this in a, if you made it in a solid, even a silk or like a really nice wool, I could actually imagine that being quite a stunning sort of formal wear dress. And I've just had a really good question by Ruth. How do you stabilize the waist seam? It hasn't been covered. I'm going to talk about it in a second, because Yolanda just asked as well, why didn't you put the zipper at the back? Good question. So I have got a center back seam, but I love the detail of having it on the bias, because that means you have it on the bias. You get the really nice chevron on the shoulder. I think if you had it on the straight of grain on the center back, thinking you still get a chevron, but it just be straight across the back or straight down. So I didn't want to put a zip in mine, because I think we talked about it on one of the drafting analyses. You could put a zip on the center back, but I wouldn't do it on a true bias, or I will avoid it unless you really stabilize it. So if you did your back on a straight of grain or something, then I would you can easily put the zipper in the center back if you don't want a fully wrapped dress, if you want it more constructed. The thing is, it's quite a pretty back on here as well. So I don't know how I would feel. I don't know what a horizontal stripe, how, if I did a horizontal stripe across, put a zipper in, then I would probably turn the back into some sort of raglan. So you interrupt the stripe, because otherwise you get the stripe going across like that. And I think it makes you feel really broad at the back. So let's talk about stabilizing it. And Kate just said it'd be lovely in a Dupion silk. Yes, it'd be really nice. Actually, I'm going to show you a silk I have. This is, I think it's from the 60s. It's like, it's not a Dupion silk. It's more of a shot raw silk. But it's got, it's a very dry. But you could imagine that in a new, like in a, just a plain, it's got that body, but it's not too stiff because you still want to drape it, but it's got enough body. So let's talk about stabilizing the waist. So we had quite a few talks about it when we first made the drafting tutorial for just the bodice in last year. And I've talked about a bit. So what I've done is both. What I've done my, I don't know why I've just turned it inside out. On both the half scale and the full scale, I've actually done the under, the left-hand side, which is the under wrap. I've done it with a separate waist panel, which is on the straight of grain. So that makes it more structured. And what I would actually do if you made this dress, when it opens up, I would face that waist panel completely, again in the straight of grain, and that would add, that would stabilize the whole waist. Then for this one, I haven't finished, I've just done it like that. On my dress, I'm going to take it off now, so I'm going to disappear for a second so I can show you the inside. So it'll be about 10 seconds. Hold on a second. This is like one of these TV shows where people disappear and they come back as somebody different, just slightly less organized. So I've got my dress inside out already. What I have done, and this is not done on purpose. Yes, I'm going to show you the straight of grain section on the pattern on my full size so you can see it better. So this is my dress inside out. So this is the inside panel. So you can see the whole waist panel is cut on the straight of grain. And on the drafting, if you're on Patreon, on the drafting tutorial, I talk about how to create it and how you can do the under panel either as one, but I quite like a waist panel because you can put in all your shaping, get rid of all your darts, and you get that straight of grain. And yes, Kate, it was a really fast change. I haven't practiced, but it was luck. I didn't rip out my hairstyle or something. So that actually does quite a lot of stabilizing. So I've tried this dress out throughout the making, and just by having a panel, that keeps it pretty much in check. But then what I've also done, and that's not done on purpose, that's because I changed my mind halfway through and I wanted the base slightly higher. I've used the axis of my body, but I've made my dress shorter as a sort of stabilizing tape. And that's what I will actually do if you make it properly, not a mistake. I would do the straight of grain panel at the front. And then I would also add a stabilizing tape around the base seam. And a lot of people use grow grain. So what you also call, I don't think it's the same. It's like a really nicely woven tape. And you can just sort of top stitch that in, and that will hold it really nice, and it will hold all your waist seam allowance and hide it and look really professional. If you look at a lot of sort of vintage evening wear, they quite often have a grow grain stabilizer. And then you can even, you go back to the half scale one, with the grow grain, you can have that basically joins everything up. You can have a little popper on your grow grain or hook and eye to hold it all together. Okay, now I've got lots of questions. So the straight of grain panel is attached to a top. It's basically because this is the wrap top. I'm going to do the small one. My left-hand side hasn't got any of the pleating. My left-hand side is a straight of grain base panel, and then it's got the bias top half. And then my right-hand side is all cut on the bias. But with the right-hand side, I would then add what I call a grow grain, what could also be a Petersham. And I know there's a difference between one has got ripped edge and one hasn't. So it's something like, and you see where it's going to go out of focus. It's something like that. You can get beautiful 100% cottons. I think this is a grow grain because it's got the little knobbly ends. And Kate, what do you mean by a vase stay? Is that a different type? Is that an American term? Is that again like putting like a really stiff tape in to hold it all in? Might be. Oh, and Ruth, I'm actually not for how to put the base panel. I talk all about it on the drafting tutorial. But I didn't actually talk about the grosgrain, so this is quite good. And I will put that in the description of the sewing tutorial, that you can add grosgrain tape. And hold on a second. I just got this book, which lots of you loved. And I'm pretty sure it covers that. I'm going to look it up. But it's a typical sort of 19, I imagine it would have been always used until we moved into Jersey. And our waiststay would be a twill tape. Yeah, so Kate, you could use that as well. I think grosgrain looks quite pretty on the inside, but a waist like a twill tape would use just as well. And what I did as well with my dress, which I'm going to turn inside out again. Oh, so hold a second. We got lots of, okay, so Lisa, yes, I think you're right. Vintage books often use grosgrain for waiststay, and it was actually Astrid who suggested grosgrain again. But one of the French companies I worked with, we always put grosgrain on the waist because it just looks really pretty. And a waist, Kate, so a waiststay is a ribbon that goes on with a popper, but it's not completely sewn, binded into the seam, just tacked on at some places. I see what you mean. So it's just like a sort of, it's sort of quite clever. So it's just attached to some places, hand stitched, and then it just it basically just it sits true to your waist, and it sort of holds everything on, so it doesn't move too much. So you could do that. I guess it depends what you want to achieve. If it's slightly looser, I would probably do that. But if it's fitted, you can probably fully attach it all the way around. Oh, so a waiststay, Sharon, there you go. We got so much information here in the chat. It's fantastic. The waiststay keeps the stress off a closure. So if a garment is more tightly fitted, they're very useful. So opposite of what I said. There you go. So yes, so it's basically if you have even actually it's okay because I've got a zip, so it's sort of moved around the volume. It's tight anywhere, but wherever you have the tightest point, you're basically gonna get tension. So that's another really good thing. So if you have whether it's a zip or hook and eye, or the wrap closure, if you have a tape coming up to here, like this, and then it's got a hook and eye there where the tightest part of your garment is, that will basically keep the stress off the zip. Oh, and it's somebody's roof also says it supports the weight of full skirt. Yes, and that's exactly what we've got here. I think because the top, especially the back, is on bias, you want to stabilize the waist with something. This is a really lightweight linen, so that actually works all right. And because I've also added I've added the inside the tube for my elastic, so that stabilizes and holds everything up. And because I've got the elastic in there, it sits really tight, and that again holds the skirt up. And now we've got a really good comment by Lisa, if I can catch up. So Adele Marjolis mentioned tucking a waiststay only in the cross seams when you're doing a shift style dress, but for dress with a waist seam, she has it sewn on all along waistline. So I was sort of right, just not for this dress. So if you have a slightly looser dress, and if you only tuck it on, it just sort of stabilizes everything. But something fitted like that, you can just stitch it into your waist seam, and it will just mean it basically serves the same purpose as my extra seam allowance I've changed into a tape. It just stabilizes, and it makes it slightly stronger, because otherwise you got the whole skirt hanging off at one seam. So if this was like a heavier wool or even a silk, and if you think how silk sometimes becomes quite brittle, you can imagine it's sort of slightly pulling too much. So by adding something which holds it up, that should stabilize a bit. And yes, I agree with all of you. It's a really beautiful detail. And one other thing which isn't, I've seen on other dresses, what you can also do is sometimes you can actually stitch what they call a stitch into the trench of a gutter. So you can actually fix it from the outside again, just in the gut, where the two seams meet, and then again it sort of just holds it all together a bit more. So that's a really nice detail. I'm going to see whether I can find it in this book and in my I'm going to have a look in my vintage books and see if I can find the section on how to do it, and then I will put it on the Patreon post for you all. And I'm sure you, by the sound of it, you have it all well covered. So anyway, what is the time? Yes, it is nearly 9 o'clock. So have you got any last questions? If you're my Patreon, of course, please join me on Tuesday, where we can go into more detailed questions about strip gussets, for example, or any other questions which are coming up in the drafting tutorial. But are there any questions about what I've just talked about? Was I unclear about anything? If everything has been clear, then I'm going to sign off in a second. But it's been lovely chatting to you all. You can see I've talked too much. But I'm glad you enjoyed this dress. This has been a bit of a journey. I'm very grateful to Kate, who sort of really encouraged me to do it, because you loved it so much, the dress. So that's great. And it's been, what I found most fascinating is how sometimes you look at something vintage and then we sort of think, oh, I'm quite not sure this will work for me, and I've got a really clever way, and we overcomplicate things too much. And this is what I've done with my dress. So it fits really nicely, but I've probably slightly over-engineered it. And if I'd done it next time, I would do it like original. And we got one last question about Ruth, about the sleeve edges. I have talked about it in the Patreon tutorial, but I'm going to talk about it quickly now. I've done a facing, and because I've got a seam at the top of the sleeve and underneath, what you have to be really careful with that style, any dolman style sleeve or gusset sleeve, or anything like that, is that you never wanted to. Oh, you can actually see on my dress. On my top? Can you see it dips up a bit? I'm gonna quickly show you, Ruth. I've done it without a seam at the top. I'll talk about how to do that on the drafting tutorial, and also how to stitch it in. But I quickly share with you what I've done on my file, on my own one. I've used organdy as my interfacing. So you can interface it with iron interfacing or whatever cotton you normally use. But because I wanted this to have quite a lot of airy stiffness, I used organdy. So I've just we got self-facing and self-facing. Oh goodness, sorry. My self-facing is interfaced in organdy, and I've actually bagged it out. So that's actually a really nice detail. You get a really nice edge on the inside. Oh, and Kate already has, if you got this one, Kate, you are a marvel. It says 100 page 140. We've got the base day. Yes, there you go. So I can put that in the Patreon for you. It's got a whole page on base day. So that's fantastic. I'm going to see on my other books where we can find something, and we can do lots of different versions of race days. And yes, Sharon, one last thing, it's a really nice I normally do normal interfacing, but because I used organdy, I bagged it out. So all my finishing on the inside, it's super neat. And because organdy is so light but stiff, it's beautiful to use. It costs an absolute fortune. And Ruth, if you ask, I will ask Astrid. She managed to get some organdy. It's always a fortune. It's something ridiculous. I got mine from Switzerland. This is from my graduate collection 15 years ago. And I got a whole roll from the manufacturer because you wholesale prices. But I think even wholesale, it was £20 a meter. And I think it's something like ridiculous, like £40. It might be cheaper in the States, it often is. Because can you see, it's like air. But you know how old organza is awful and it like moves and it never lays still. This is really stiff and it gives beautiful sculpture for something which is invisible. So if you can get your hands on it, get some, even if you treat it very little one. Oh, Sharon says there's Islander sewing systems, or Janet Prey maybe. Yeah, just make sure it's cotton organdy rather than polyester or silk. But it's beautiful. Yes, it needs to be cotton. Yeah, asked, yes. So you can get but I guess there might be polyester on, which is fine, but silk becomes organza, so it still has some of the sculpturalness, but it's really fluid. Well, this, if you steam it, if you press it, it becomes really flat and it's really nice to use. You can do beautiful seams and everything, you see, because you can just fold it. I've made whole garments out of it. But yes, so maybe we need to sort of do some brainstorming on how to get some cotton organdy. I've asked Astrid what she says, because she managed to get some. But anyway, that's it for me for tonight. It was really nice to chat from you, and I've learned something about vase days, so that's fantastic. And I hope you found this helpful as well. And I look forward to seeing some of you on Tuesday night on Patreon, which will be the same format. But because on Patreon, we can go into a bit more details about drafting. Yes, and you could easily use fabric spray glue even to fix it on. So that's great. Anyway, it was so lovely to chat to you. So bye-bye, Ruth, and bye-bye, Anita. You were very welcome, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. Bye, Kate. And yes, Kate, I love learning from all of you and sort of communication and interaction, how we all sort of join in. Oh, and Anita is just saying mood has organdy. So if you're in the US, you probably know what mood is. I don't. Yes, organdy. Yes. So have a look. It's mostly cotton organdy. But anyway, that's it for me for tonight. Lovely to see you all. Bye bye, everybody. Oh, bye, Sharon, and bye, Miss Janet. And I'll see you on Tuesday, Janet. Bye bye. And no worries, Ruth. It was my pleasure. It was great fun. Bye, everybody.